There's a moment in every man's life, sometimes quiet, sometimes violent, when he looks up from the field he's been playing on and realizes, this was never my game. The rules were already written, the scoreboard already rigged, the trophies already meaningless, but he didn't notice at first, because they told him it was the game. Get the grades, win the job, stack the money, build the image, run faster, climb higher, stay busy, and never ask why. Napoleon Hill warned us in silent tones, not just in Think and Grow Rich, but in the darker truths of outwitting the devil. He said the real enemy is not failure. The real enemy is drifting, playing by rules you never question, chasing goals that aren't yours, and becoming a champion in a game that empties your soul. You see, there's a war that doesn't make headlines. It's the war for your attention, your identity, your inner compass. And most people lose before they realize it's even begun. Because the modern world has perfected a system, a silent arena that rewards imitation and punishes self-authorship. They sell you ambition like it's salvation, but it's often a leash in disguise. They give you dopamine and applause and paychecks, but rob you of alignment, meaning, and stillness. You were born original, but somewhere along the line, you were taught to compete in a game that strips you of everything that made you rare. And here's the most dangerous part. You might win. You might climb the ladder. You might collect the trophies. You might succeed in their system. And still feel the haunting question echo in your chest. Why does none of this feel like mine? This is the wake-up call most avoid, but not you. Because once you recognize that you've been playing the wrong game, you also awaken to the power to stop, to walk away, to rebuild, to choose not just a new game, but a new self, one aligned with truth, not trend, legacy, not noise. You don't need more motivation. You need clarity and the courage to reclaim your rules. Let's begin. Excellent. We now step into the heart of the illusion. Before a man ever chooses his path, he is handed one. Not by malice, but by momentum. The world does not sit you down and ask who you are. It tells you what to be. It builds the arena before you can speak, carves lanes for your feet before you learn to walk. And like most, you entered it without question, born into systems, measured by standards, moved by forces you could not name. School bells, job titles, social ladders, all designed to train your instinct for compliance while dressing it up as ambition. They never taught you how to sculpt a life, only how to fit inside one. This is the default arena. And it is brilliant in its design, not because it empowers you, but because it convinces you that you are free while binding you with invisible cords. It rewards you just enough to keep you running. It shamas deviation, celebrates obedience, and trains your value in comparison to others. But here's the truth they never told you. Most of the world's high performers are simply well-trained players in the wrong game. They sprint in circles for applause. They chase goals with no soul. They climb ladders propped against walls they didn't choose. This is how you become externally impressive, but internally unknown. And it starts early. A child gets a gold star for repeating the correct answer, not asking a deeper question. A teenager is told what career is realistic before he knows what legacy means. An adult trades dreams for stability, then slowly dies in routine, and all the while he's told, this is life. This is how it works. But listen closely. There's a silence between the noise, a still voice beneath the program. And it says, this is not your highest self. This is a role you were trained to play. The default arena is not a conspiracy. It is a system of drift. Hill called it hypnosis, a silent influence that causes the majority to move without thinking, follow without questioning, and strive without knowing why. He said the drifter is the one who lets circumstance dictate his rhythm. And most people are drifting, even when they look like they're winning. Read that again. Because this is the trap of modern performance. You're praised for adapting to a broken system. You're applauded for surviving a game that doesn't feed your soul. You can succeed brilliantly at the wrong thing. And the better you are at it, the harder it is to stop. Because now you're invested. You've built an identity around the scoreboard. You've earned the respect of others for playing well. You've attached your worth to the image and your fear to its loss. And this is where most people stay, for decades, for lifetimes. But you're here because something in you has begun to rebel, a quiet revolt, not loud, not dramatic, just a subtle sense that something is off. And that's not weakness, that's intelligence. That's the early whisper of awakening, your inner compass returning from exile. Because once you start to see the arena, you can no longer pretend it's the world. You recognize the artificial lights, the pre-written lines, the recycled desires. You see that success in this world is often measured by how well you conform, not how deeply you align. And you feel it in your body, the disconnect, the dullness, the restlessness beneath achievement. It's not burnout. It's misalignment. The game wasn't made for you. It was made to shape you into something useful for them. But you were not born to be useful. You were born to be true. And the moment you realize that truth is not found in their praise or their path, is the moment the exit begins to appear. Not on the outside, but within. A shift in attention. A return to the self. This is the beginning of your departure. But first, you must see what kept you playing. The real trap isn't the arena. It's what the arena gives you. We explore that next. Moving forward into the next descent. Every game survives on rewards. Not just prizes, but validation, applause, recognition, and symbols of progress. They aren't neutral. They are crafted. And in the wrong game, they become your leash. Here's the hidden machinery of the default arena. It doesn't force you to stay. It makes you want to stay. You chase the promotion not because it's your purpose, but because it's the next glowing token on the track. You show up to play harder, not because the game fulfills you, but because they've woven your self-worth into the scoreboard. It's not always money. Sometimes it's being seen as the one who made it. Sometimes it's admiration from the same crowd that's just as lost as you are. You don't notice you're in prison because the cage is lined with compliments. This is the reward trap, a system of psychological hooks that feeds your ego while starving your soul. You begin to confuse motion with meaning. You mistake being wanted with being worthy. You confuse being seen with being known. And in the process, you sacrifice the quiet, sacred space where your original self used to live. Napoleon Hill said this plainly. Most men will go to great lengths to avoid being laughed at, even if it means living a lie. Let that sit. Because if you're honest, how many times have you betrayed what you felt in your bones, just to remain acceptable, celebrated, or safe? How many times have you said yes to a role, a partnership, a performance, because walking away would have made people ask questions you weren't ready to answer? And that's the power of the trap. It doesn't need to chain your body. It only needs to train your fear. It makes you think that losing the reward means losing your value. So you stay, even when the work drains you, even when the mirror feels foreign, even when silence becomes unbearable. Because you've built a life around applause, and applause is addicting. It's instant, it's loud, it's measurable, but it's also empty unless it echoes your truth. And for most, it doesn't. It reflects a version of you they learned to love, but not the one you came here to be. This is why internal conflict grows the higher you climb in the wrong game. On the surface, you're doing everything right. But underneath, something's rotting. Integrity, clarity, sovereignty. You smile for the photo. You hit the target. You celebrate with others. But when the lights are off and it's just you and the ceiling fan, a different voice speaks. One that says, you gave too much of yourself away for this. You feel it when you can't rest without guilt, when you can't pause without panic, when even your success feels like survival. And so, the rewards keep you moving but never arriving. Because they're not designed to end your search. They're designed to keep you searching. That's how the game survives. It dangles your next identity just ahead of your current one. The better version of you is always one trophy away. One more hustle. One more sacrifice. One more notch on the scoreboard. But here's what they don't want you to discover. The real you can't be improved. Only uncovered. You don't need to be optimized like a product. You need to be remembered like a sacred fire that was buried under layers of performance. And that process? That's not rewarded in the system. It's punished because it makes you harder to manipulate. It makes you unpredictable. It makes you sovereign. And sovereign beings don't need constant validation. That's why most people never leave the trap. Because freedom requires losing everything you built to impress the wrong audience. It requires walking away before you're understood. It requires shedding the costume before you know who you'll be without it. That's terrifying, but it's also divine. Because only in that sacred shedding do you begin to see your real shape. Not the shape you were told to sculpt. Not the image the market loves. But the form your soul has been whispering all along. This is the moment when ambition breaks, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. You stop chasing the reward and start asking the question, what would I do if there was no trophy? No followers? No accolades? No one watching? Would you still write? Build? Lead? Would you still wake up with fire? Would you still follow the path that terrifies you, even if no one ever clapped? If the answer is yes, you're getting closer. If the answer is no, you're still playing someone else's game. You don't need to hate the rewards. You just need to stop needing them. Because as long as you need them, they own you. Your real game begins where their scoreboard ends. And to reach it, you must do the rarest thing of all. Walk away. Not in anger, in sovereignty. Not to escape, to return. We turn now to the power of the invisible refusal. We now step into the turning point. This is the moment most never reach, not because they can't, but because the silence it requires terrifies them. Before transformation ever becomes visible, it begins in silence. Not with a declaration, not with an announcement, but with a quiet refusal. A man doesn't always rise by climbing. Sometimes he rises by standing still, by no longer running toward what drains him. It looks like nothing from the outside, but inside it's a revolution. No protest, no drama. Just a single sovereign moment when a man says to himself, no more. Not because he is broken, but because he is finally whole enough to stop betraying himself. This is the invisible refusal, the sacred exit from a game that no longer deserves your energy. And make no mistake, it is the most dangerous threat to any system of control. Because the moment you stop chasing the wrong thing, the system loses its grip. They can't motivate you. They can't shame you. They can't seduce you with rewards that no longer hold meaning. You become immune. And immunity, in a world built on manipulation, is a superpower. But here's why most never get there. Refusal feels like death. To the ego, letting go of the known, even if it's killing you, feels more terrifying than continuing the performance. To say no is to face the void. To face the void is to admit you don't yet know who you are without the script. And so, many return to the game, not because they want to, but because the arena is familiar and the silence is not. Napoleon Hill warned us about this in Outwitting the Devil. He said that once a man stops drifting, once he becomes definiteness in human form, he terrifies the systems around him. Because a man who refuses the wrong game is hard to buy, hard to predict, hard to manipulate. He no longer needs permission. He no longer obeys by default. He no longer performs. He creates. And that shift doesn't require fanfare. It begins with an invisible break. One morning, you don't check the scoreboard. One afternoon, you don't say yes to the thing that dishonors you. One evening, you sit in the silence instead of numbing it. These are not grand moves, but they are tectonic. Because slowly, a different compass begins to wake. Not the compass of what works or what gets me ahead, but the compass of what's real. What aligns? What echoes in your chest? What burns in your belly even when no one is watching? This is what separates the awakened from the trapped. The trapped asks, what should I do next? The awakened asks, what no longer deserves my energy? And the answers are often terrifying. The relationship that looks good on paper, but kills your spirit. The job that pays well, but erodes your soul. The identity that earned applause, but silences your truth. To refuse these things isn't easy. It's excruciating. Because you're not just walking away from comfort. You're walking away from the person you became to survive it. Let that land. Sometimes, to become who you truly are, you must disappoint the person you spent years performing as. And that's grief. That's mourning. That's evolution. You won't be clapped for this. There are no standing ovations for walking away from the stage. There are no trophies for choosing silence over spectacle. But there is something deeper, self-respect. Not the kind they teach you in school. The kind that's earned in the dark, when you keep your word to your soul. It's the quiet knowing that you didn't sell out, that you didn't betray the fire, that when the moment came to stay or stand, you stood. This is how the new game begins. Not by entering something louder, but by exiting something false. And yes, you will lose things, status, comfort, the approval of those who only knew the old you. But what you gain is the most valuable thing a man can possess, a life that fits your soul. That doesn't happen all at once. But it begins in the refusal, invisible to the world, unmistakable to you, because you'll feel it, a subtle strength returning, a different kind of breath, a new clarity in your eyes when you look in the mirror. And here's the paradox. By refusing to perform in the wrong game, you begin to rise in the right one. Not the one designed to keep you spinning, but the one built on truth, alignment, and quiet legacy. It starts now. We're leaving the old arena behind, not just physically, but energetically. Now, it's time to build the true one. We now cross the threshold. Everything up to this point has been about deconstruction, removing what was never yours. But now, we begin again. There's a silence after the storm. Not emptiness, but clarity. Not absence, but alignment. It is here that the true arena begins. Not as a place you find, but a space you remember. Because the real game isn't built, it's revealed. Once the old layers fall away, the titles, the trophies, the noise, you begin to feel something ancient stir beneath your ribs. A pulse, a knowing. A gravitational pull towards something real. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It waits. It has always waited, behind the mask, beneath the rhythm of performance, beneath the clamor of other people's expectations. The true arena isn't crowded. It isn't loud. Because very few make it here. Not because they can't, but because it costs too much. You don't pay in money. You pay in identity. You trade the safety of imitation for the risk of authenticity. You give up applause for the sound of your own voice. You let go of the map and trust the compass. This is what makes the true arena sacred. Because once you arrive, everything changes. You no longer act from fear. You no longer create from lack. You no longer chase. You offer. The true arena is where purpose replaces pressure. Where your work is no longer a performance, it becomes a transmission, not to impress, but to express. You start building not for image, but for legacy. You speak not for validation, but from vision. And your power shifts. You no longer ask, will they like this? You begin to ask, does this honor my truth? Napoleon Hill spoke of this in the language of definiteness. He said the master of destiny is the one who knows who he is, what he wants, and why he is willing to pay the price, not out of desperation, but out of design. This is the energy of the true arena. It doesn't ask for more hustle. It asks for more honesty. It's not about working harder. It's about aligning deeper. so deep that your presence becomes the message. You don't need to convince, you become the proof. But here's the paradox. The true arena often begins in obscurity. There's no welcome party, no guaranteed audience, no algorithm handing you attention. At first, it feels like exile. But in time, you realize it's liberation. Because for the first time, you're not trying to fit. You're trying to be. That's rare. That's divine. That's powerful. And slowly, you begin to rebuild. Not from pressure, but from presence. You pick up tools you've forgotten you loved. You resurrect ideas that used to scare you. You chase stillness instead of status. And here's what you notice. The more you align with this deeper current, the less you need to prove anything. You begin to walk differently. You speak with weight. You build with intention. Even your silence gains gravity. Because when a man no longer plays the wrong game, he doesn't need to yell. His life becomes the statement. The true arena doesn't give you more control. It returns you to what you always had, sovereignty. You stop reacting to life. You start sculpting it, like an architect of alignment, like a warrior of stillness. You don't need to dominate others. You need only to dominate your own direction. That's what power truly is. And yes, it's quieter than you thought. But it's also unshakable. Because when your life is built on soul truth, not social proof, you become untouchable by trends, rejection, and noise. This is the arena where legends are made, not through noise, but through depth. Because the world doesn't need more performers. It needs more presences. Men and women who know who they are, why they create, and what hill they are willing to die on. That's who you become here. Not a player in the system, but a presence that changes it. You've left the old game behind. Now, you don't just walk differently. You build differently. Not just for today, but for the future self watching you now. It's time to enter the inner code of greatness. We now descend deeper into the heart of the self. Not the self they taught you to become, but the one you were born to remember. Inside every person, there is a silent architecture, a structure built not of wood or stone, but of will, of knowing, of inner truth. You didn't build it with your hands. You carried it in your bones the day you arrived. But over time, the noise covered it. The systems buried it. The scoreboard distorted it. And in the scramble to make it, most people forget the one thing that would have made them great, who they already were before the world told them who to be. Napoleon Hill called it definiteness of purpose. But it goes deeper than goals or productivity. This is not about having a 5-year plan. It's about uncovering the inner code that governs your soul. You see, there is a difference between motivation and code. Motivation fades. Code remains. Motivation is emotional hype. Code is spiritual law. Code is what guides you when no one's watching. It's what holds you upright when the applause stops. It's what whispers, keep going. Not for reward, but because your truth demands it. To unlock your code is to remember that greatness was never about doing more. It was about doing only what aligns with who you truly are. And that begins with stillness. Not silence, but stillness. A sacred space where you stop asking the world what you should do and start listening to the deeper voice inside you. The one that's been speaking in symbols, through frustration, through boredom, through misalignment. Every time your spirit winced when you said yes to what felt like no, that was the code trying to surface. Every time you sat in success and still felt hollow, that was the code reminding you, you are not here to be impressive. You are here to be true. That's the difference. Impressive fades. True echoes. And to live from your code is to create echoes, ripples in time that stretch beyond your lifespan. That's legacy. But here's the key. You cannot download your code from books or mentors. You must remember it in solitude. That is the sacred fire of greatness. It cannot be taught. It must be ignited. And to ignite it, you must be willing to lose what's unaligned. The job, The version of yourself that made you liked. The routines that made you predictable. This is the price of code. You will lose your comfort to gain your clarity. But what you gain is unshakable. You gain a direction that cannot be bought, a backbone that doesn't bend for trends, a rhythm that is not dictated by fear or approval, but by destiny. Read that again. Because once you're living by code, everything simplifies. You know what to say yes to. You know what to cut. You know who to become. And that clarity removes the need for overthinking, overplanning, over-explaining. When you're led by code, people may not understand you, but they will feel you. Your presence carries weight. Your words hit deeper. Your silence becomes a mirror. Because you are no longer performing a life. You are transmitting your essence. The man or woman led by code becomes magnetic, not because of charisma, but because of clarity. They don't need to market themselves. They embody their truth. Their walk becomes testimony. Their discipline becomes sacred. Their work becomes ritual. And this is where your true game lives, not in competition. In contribution, you're no longer trying to be better than others. You're trying to be faithful to the assignment buried in your soul. You wake up not to win, but to build what only you can build. And that's the secret Hill understood. The wealthiest man is not the one with the most, but the one with the clearest why, the strongest who, and the boldest what for. You don't need to impress the world. You need to embody your design. That's the code. And once you unlock it, you never return to the default game again. You can't, because you've tasted something deeper, integrity with yourself. From this point on, your work is no longer about proving. It's about remembering. Your business becomes your ministry. Your craft becomes your mirror. Your decisions become declarations, not of what's profitable, but of what's true. This is the arena of the few. The ones who said no to comfort, yes to clarity, and walked toward the unknown to find themselves again. This is where you are now, not lost, but found by the code you've carried all along. Now we enter the final truth, the quiet victory. We now close the ritual, not with noise, but with knowing. It is a return. There's a kind of victory that no one sees. No medals, no stage, no headline to prove it happened, but inside, everything has changed. The noise is gone. The crowd is gone, and still you rise. This is the rarest kind of win, the kind no one claps for, but you never forget. Because it didn't come from domination. It came from alignment. Not from being more, but from becoming whole. You're no longer running to be seen. You're no longer chasing to be chosen. You're no longer working to be worthy. Because you remembered what was true all along. You are the source. You are the origin. You are the author. Everything you tried to become, you already were. But you had to walk through the fire of unlearning. You had to dismantle the false arenas. You had to lose the life they praised to build the one your soul deserved. This is not the path of most, because it is lonely at first, quiet, uncelebrated, invisible, but slowly it becomes sacred. Because now you don't build for attention. You build for alignment, for legacy, for the younger version of you who dreamed before he was trained to compete, and for the future version of you, the one watching now, who whispers, "Thank you for not betraying us again." This is your reward, not a trophy, but a life that fits. Not applause, but peace. Not success by their terms, but sovereignty by yours. You know who you are now. You know what game you're playing. And more importantly, you know why. And that knowledge is unstealable. Because you've proven something sacred, that you can walk away from the wrong game before you're broken by it. That you can find clarity without needing a crisis. That you can win quietly, without becoming someone you hate in the process. This is true power. Not control over others, but control over your direction, your attention, your energy. You're no longer waiting to be chosen. You've chosen yourself. So now you don't fear the silence. You welcome it. Because you learn that silence isn't emptiness. It's the sound of alignment returning. And when the world tries to pull you back, you won't answer. Not out of arrogance, but because you finally remembered you never needed a bigger stage. You needed a deeper why. You never needed to outperform others. You needed to stop performing at all. Now, you walk with a different rhythm, one only you can hear, one only the soul can guide. Let the world chase trophies. You've chosen truth. Let the crowd demand speed. You've chosen stillness. Let the noise seduce. You've chosen code. And in the end, that's the only victory that matters. You've carried the code all along. Now you have the key. Use it.